What's going on, everybody? Welcome to this week's LUMIX Live. We are, as the title says, we are going to be talking about all things compact from the LUMIX line of cameras. And this is going to be a fairly kind of loose conversation about it. I don't have every single one of our point and shoot cameras here to really be able to pick one up and go over details with everybody, but knowing that from the poll that we took last week about, what system cameras are people using? Are you guys on S series, G series, or point and shoot cameras? What kind of category is the biggest with everybody? Point and shoots were fairly low on that list, and I wanted to give an opportunity for everybody to kind of ask the questions that everyone has about, why use a point and shoot camera these days? What are the benefits of them? What of the LUMIX lineup in the point and shoot cameras are out there? Which ones are best for what kind of scenario that you want to shoot with? And cover some of the cool, unique features that we have in some of our cameras that just aren't found in other point and shoots as well. And especially in the day and age where a lot of us use these as our kind of carry around general cameras, why pick a dedicated camera over a mobile device? So if you are new to these LUMIX live streams, this is one of the many different styles of streams that we do. These kinds of conversations, just talking about technology, answering any of the questions that y'all have out there, and just kind of having a good community talk. We also do a lot of interviews and conversations with filmmakers and photographers from varying different areas of the industry to get it, kind of an insight into their creative process, what kind of things that they run into when they're on productions, to kind of help get more ideas out to everyone in the community, so that maybe there's something somebody else is doing that, triggers a cool idea for you to try something new yourself. Again, if you're new to this, kind of going along that train of thought, there are a couple of things that I'd like to get out of the way at the beginning of these, and that is if you want to interact with me or anybody in the chat, make sure to use the, to tag at LUMIX Cameras before your questions. That's actually by typing the @ symbol, LUMIX Cameras. You'll see it pop up in the chat on YouTube, and that just makes it so it pops up on my side and I can actually see it through all of the different conversations that are going on. I want to try to not miss anyone's questions that anyone has about it. Outside of that, yeah, like I said, this is going to be very heavily driven by the questions that y'all have. I have some questions that have come in over email, so we do accept questions over at lumixlive@us.panasonic.com so that we can kind of address some of those things where possible. So I've got a couple already kind of stored away that we're going to cover up to. And then, yeah, I think that pretty much covers the normal entry stuff about it. Yeah. So, like always, at the beginning of every LUMIX Live that we've been doing for a while, I like to mention the LUMIX Pro Services platform that we have. We have this for both the Red and the Platinum tier here in the United States. These are service programs that are designed to support you in the field should something go bad while you're actually out shooting. The Red membership is a free level, so you can just go right in, register, you put your cameras in, that gets you that whole kind of setup. You get online tracking for any kind of situation where you may have to be sending your camera in for service. It gets you registered for that 3-year warranty, and the site has information as to what is involved with that 3-year warranty. And then we have the paid platinum tier. The paid platinum tier is the high-level program, which is designed for basically anyone who really puts their equipment, to the test. If you're someone who's working weekends, day in, day out, and you're in this industry, having the peace of mind to have a program that allows you to be able to send your cameras in to get sensor cleanings and firmware updates and calibrations, all that kind of fun stuff is a great thing to have. You get 20% off out of warranty repairs. You get free next day shipping on repair services that are sent in for 2-day. You also get a really cool welcome kit with a nice Peak Design co-designed strap. And you get exclusive membership hotline, which is probably the most important part of this. You get a direct phone number into our team so that you can troubleshoot on the go from the field. You don't necessarily have to go through the online chat programs, that kind of thing. So the QR codes that were up, feel free to take a look over at them. If you are not in the United States, we do have the Global Lumix Professional Services platform, which I will drop into the chat a little bit later. That shows you what you have in available in the different regions. It's not available in every single country, but it's available in a number of countries. Sorry, choking on my own words here. So, outside of that, let's kind of jump into it. So, let's see, a couple questions that I already see coming in here is there an FZ300 successor? Is there an FZ1000 Mark II successor? An LX100 successor? So yeah, I see a lot of people asking about, what is the future of point and shoot cameras in the industry? And, truthfully, I can't comment on anything that could be coming out in the future, any plans, that kind of thing. That's just a normal thing that happens. I don't have information that I can share, and you wouldn't really find that kind of information here on this platform unless it was, actually like after a product announcement, and then we would talk about stuff. So I don't have any information on updates to cameras like the FZ300 or the FZ1000 Mark II, or even an LX100 after the Mark II that we've got. But I do have the LX100 Mark II right here, which I have attached, so we can take a look. But yeah, so point and shoot cameras, as a lot of people probably are incredibly aware, and if you're not aware, let me enlighten you a little bit. Point and shoot cameras obviously give you a ton of different styles of capabilities over what the vast majority of people have been kind of reverting to, which is using their mobile devices to capture snapshots and general, kind of just grabs of life. And there's a big benefit that often gets overlooked when you start looking at what these kinds of cameras offer you and why you don't see relatively simple point and shoots. I'll put it that way. That's probably one of the best ways to kind of categorize it. And we have a ton of different point and shoots available on the market that cover a wide variety of use cases. Everything from something like, this is the FZ2500 that I have here on a little skate. I have an FZ300 sitting right here too, and I have an LX100 Mark II. Each one of these are going to be able to provide you very different capabilities than what a mobile device will. Everyone wants, shallow depth of field. You want bokeh. You want to be able to do that kind of the DSLR style shooting or full frame style shooting, but mobile devices are always going to end up having to be some sort of machine learning or fake version of that bokeh. And it's gotten fairly good, but there are still a lot of issues with a lot of it, where you get really bad cutouts, where the hair doesn't necessarily get masked out properly into the background. There's just no alternative to doing these kinds of things optically. And that's where one of the big benefits with a point and shoot comes in, is typically just how much larger the sensor is compared to what the average cell phone sensor's using. That's not to say that cell phones aren't starting to use larger sensors, but they're still nowhere near what you're seeing in a lot of the kind of mid to high end range point and shoot cameras on the market. The other main thing is, for those that want to be able to, go travel and have something that reaches really, really far out from a zoom range perspective and still actually have a really good, solid image out of it. Mobile devices, you have a very limited amount of space that you can work with when it comes to optics. So you're only going to get so much, kind of zoom out of a lens that's built in and hard built into the phone. And then you look at it in the other case, that it's a throwaway device. Unfortunately, these days, mobile devices are throwaway devices. So as you keep updating, the next new resolution comes out, or the next, new type of sensor comes out, and then all of a sudden everyone flocks to a new camera, and you notice that all of the phone manufacturers are starting to not starting, they've been doing it for a while. They're pushing a lot on the, hey, use your phone as a camera and you can get professional quality stills. And you can get good quality, but it's not professional quality from anything there. So when we start breaking down the different categories, it starts to look at it and say, well, what kind of photography do you like? What kind of shooting do you enjoy to go with? And as I can see some people commenting in here, you're talking about like FZ2500, like this camera is an amazing, professional level point and shoot camera, which only up until recently really became a thing, is getting a professional quality point and shoot. But then you have cameras like the LX100 or the LX100 Mark II, which are designed to be really, really high quality, compact point and shoot cameras that are giving you really fast apertures, really large lens sensors, decent zoom range, but really good for snapshots and street style photography. And then you go to something like our FZ300, which is designed to be weather resistant. It's designed to give you crazy long telephoto reach, but it's also using a slightly smaller sensor than the FZ1000 or the 2500, its counterparts in the higher end series. So you start to look and say, well, what style of shooting do you really enjoy to do? If you're someone who's always finding yourself with a mobile device, wanting to have a camera with you all the time, and you go to take a picture and you just realize that you're constantly always wanting to zoom in on it, you may want to start looking at something like an FZ camera or a ZS series cameras. If you're not in the United States, that would be something like a TZ. Since we have different names across the world, I'm going to be using the US nomenclature for the cameras. If you just do a Google search, you'll find the comparisons across them. Usually the numbers are the same, though. So cameras like a ZS70, a ZS80, ZS200, those are designed to be, kind of shirt pocket or jacket pocket size cameras that give you really, really long reach, and they're going to give you a much larger sensor, so low light shooting is going to be much nicer. You get the ability to capture raw images with them. They'll typically have viewfinders built into them, so you've got a little bit of that kind of flexibility that you would see with an interchangeable lens camera. So there's a big breadth of flexibility there. Let's see some of the couple of the questions before I go on a little bit too far. Let's see. You have an LX100 Mark II, small baby with lots of potential. Yep. I see there's actually a decent amount of people talking about LX100 series in here. Can you speak about getting macro shots with an FZ300? Yes, I can. Let's see. LX100 Mark II's go. Yep. LX100 successor. Yeah. So I guess let's actually kind of take a look at some of these, and we'll start addressing some of the questions here. So one of the questions here was, about doing macro photography or getting good macro shots with a camera like an FZ300. And one of the things that I think a lot of times gets forgotten about when you start looking at cameras like this, and it doesn't necessarily have to be an FZ300. It can be something like an LX, so smaller, more compact, or even the ZS series. They all have this functionality. When you're looking to do macro photography and you want to get really close to your subject, there's a couple of different ways that you can go about it. Because the resolutions of these cameras typically aren't the highest in the market. So when I mention highest, I'm talking like 24 to 47 megapixel, that kind of range. Those are high resolution cameras. Because a lot of these cameras aren't typically that high resolution, you start looking at, well, there's not a whole lot of cropping capability. There is, but there's not a ton of cropping capability. So it comes into, how much do you want to be able to zoom into an image? How much do you want to be able to actually get close to that one-to-one representation of what you're trying to photograph? And with cameras like this, you'll notice that no matter what mode you're in, if you're in automatic or if you go into the actual program mode, you have your ultra wide, which on an FZ300 is 25 millimeter. And you can get relatively close, but you start to, kind of run into where, you're looking at, if I'm looking at my can of water here, I can get relatively close to it, and it's okay. It's a decent looking image. But a lot of our cameras will have right on the side, on the lens barrel, you'll usually see a button that says AF with a little flower next to it. What that will do is when you enable that, you'll get a couple different modes on the back of the camera that allow you to go in and say, do you want to use macro mode or macro zoom mode? Macro mode itself, really all it's designed to do is say, I want to put my camera up real close, and I want to be able to focus much closer than the lens normally does. This comes in really, really handy if you're trying to do close-up macro shots of things that aren't necessarily going to maybe bite or sting you. For those that are looking to do ultra tiny, kind of insect photography. If you're doing things like flowers or just technical close-ups, even things like if you're trying to do photograph a circuit board, using those modes, all it's doing is it's adjusting where the the focus groups work to get them in there. And one of the questions that comes up a lot, actually, and this is one of the questions that we got from email before the stream today, was if a camera has macro autofocus mode, why not just leave it in that mode all the time? And for most people, you probably could be okay leaving it in the macro focus mode the vast majority of the time, but the reasons why you wouldn't want to leave it in that is mainly comes down to the type of shooting that you do outside of macro. If you're someone who's doing street photography, so like, and I'll use the LX100 as the example here. The LX100 Mark II is my go-to just kind of walk around travel camera when I don't want to carry around any of my interchangeable lens cameras, and I have a ton of them. This camera, I can easily just flip the switch on the side, go to my macro shooting, get really close up to something, and I can get myself, a really good high resolution close up, close to macro style shot. But if I then want to be able to walk around, downtown Austin here, and I want to be able to do some street photography with it, having the camera constantly be set in that macro autofocus mode can actually be incredibly detrimental to being able to capture something really quickly. The macro mode, because it opens up the closer focal or focus range on the lens, means that if you're photographing something and you go from really close, but then you need to go really, really far, you run into some challenges where it's just going to take much longer for the focus mechanism to go from the closest range all the way out to the furthest range. If you're someone who's used a lot of, longer telephoto lenses for wildlife shooting, you've experienced this as well. That's why a lot of longer lenses typically include some sort of lens, kind of distance limiter. So you're only focusing within certain ranges of the available area. And it's the same on these. So depending on the camera that you have, you'll have a couple of different ways that you can enable and disable that macro mode. On a camera like the LX100 Mark II, it's literally just a switch on the side to go from manual focus, macro focusing, and then just standard autofocus. So, just a matter of being able to figure out which one works best for you. On an FZ300, that particular switch is over here on the side. It just lets you get that kind of one button, and then on the back of the camera is where you'll get the display to pick which one of those modes you want. And I believe on the FZ2500, it is similar on the FZ2500. It's just actually more in a menu, so it's down on the bottom rear of the control dial in the back. Turn that one off. As far as macro goes, you want to be careful if you're going to leave it in there all of the time, depending on the type of shooting that you do. Let's see, another question here. When Panasonic make micro four thirds to L-mount adapter, I cannot use Canon lenses in G2SS, but I can use Panasonic L-mount. I don't know if I'm following your question. The micro four thirds to L-mount, probably the flange back distance, it's a little off topic for today, but the flange back distance of L-mount is 20 millimeter. Micro four thirds, I think, is 19.75, so I don't think an adapter is physically possible to go micro four thirds to L-mount. And I'm fairly certain it might not be possible to do the other way, but I don't know. Okay. Outside of that, all right, so when we go on and, kind of start looking at the rest of the cameras that we have in the market, you'll see that we've got a whole bunch of different point and shoot cameras available, depending on where you're kind of looking to go with. I see some people mentioning in here, ZS200s, and, as we said, LX100 Mark II. We also still do make waterproof cameras. We have the TS7. They're a little bit harder to find these days, mainly just because they sell pretty well, so by the time one pops up, usually they're gone. But you start looking at these different categories and these different styles, and it can kind of help you figure out which which one works best and which one would fit, kind of ideal for your scenario. Again, if you're someone who likes to travel a lot and you want to be able to get something that's got really good zoom range, but you don't want to necessarily have something that's DSLR styled or traditional SLR styling, so a large camera like this, that's where a camera like the ZS series is going to be perfect for your style of shooting. It has a built-in viewfinder. It's got a nice long zoom range on here, so like the ZS200 here. And again, I apologize if I have to do this through the web, and show you just pictures of these, because again, I don't have every single one of our point and shoot cameras anymore. A camera like this is going to be getting you, it's got a built-in viewfinder, has a pop-up flash for those times when you do just want, kind of snapshot, you want something that's just good to throw in a pocket. The cameras are also all built with our 4K photo, with our post-focus functionality, so they all carry the 4K video, that a lot of people are wanting these days for general shooting. But importantly, a camera like the ZS200 is a 24 to 360 millimeter zoom lens built into this camera, and the camera is it's pretty much the same size as my LX100 Mark II. It's a little bit thinner when it's closed, and a little bit taller just because of the form factor. So you're getting something that has crazy long reach, that fits in your pocket, that you don't really have to carry much extra with if you're looking to just keep yourself nice, compact, and travel friendly. When you start looking at going maybe a step higher than that, I mentioned the LX100 Mark II a couple of times already. And again, the LX100 Mark II is my go-to, kind of just tooling around camera. When I don't want to carry an interchangeable lens camera, this is the one that goes with me, mainly because I can fit this in either my jacket pocket when I'm riding the bike, and it just fits right in there, so I don't really have to worry about it. If I do want to take an interchangeable lens camera, that's where I'm bringing my the G100 with me if I'm riding on the bike. If I am carrying my backpack and a tripod and all that kind of stuff, then I go to my interchangeable lens cameras. But this will usually be in the bag every time I go, especially when I used to be traveling for work all across the U.S. to work at different dealers. This would be the camera that would always be out of the bag, even when I'm on the plane, just being able to capture those out of window shots of sunset or sunrise, because I fly early and I fly really, really late. I never fly in the middle of the day. So awesome camera as everyone's starting to cautiously get back to starting to travel to a point. Having something like this is going to be immensely better as far as the image quality goes and what you can get out of it by compared to a mobile device. Let's see, kind of question we got here. Cliff, Panasonic plans for NAB? Nothing I can talk about at this time. So, unfortunately, I'm not part of the NAB planning team as far as what's going on with that show. So, sorry, Cliff. FC, which point and shoot camera is equivalent to GoPro? I don't like GoPros because as a fisheye lens, I prefer rectilinear. Small point and shoots would be nice for behind the scenes video. It's actually a pretty good question. We used to have an action camera. It was the Panasonic A1. Basically, I have something that looks similar to it. So this is my POV camera for my motorcycle. We made a camera very similar to this kind of design. That basically was a GoPro style camera. We stopped selling it a number of years ago, unfortunately. So there's not really anything that's GoPro-like. And all of them typically had that ultra wide angle field of view. But in a case like that, if you're looking for something that can give you like a good, kind of BTS style shooting that's going to get, relatively good wide angle shots, you could look at something like an LX100. I know it's not the most video focused. It is a very heavily photo focused camera. I'm going to switch camera angles here. It's a very photo-centric camera. There's no mic inputs. It still does 4K video, but it's limited to, I think, around like 10 or 15 minutes because it's ultra small, compact, that kind of thing. But it gets you at least the benefit that you've got something that's got a 1.7 lens on it. It's about a 24 millimeter. Is it 24? Yeah, it's a 24 millimeter wide angle lens, a relatively wide angle lens. So you've got, you've got something pretty solid for just kind of simple BTS. You know, you don't need really long shots with it. Um, it's really, as far as GoPro style, again, yeah, there's just not much from many manufacturers outside of GoPro at that point. Um, if you want to step up and have a point and shoot that's going to be able to mix pretty well, if you've got, you know, like if you're shooting, you know, Vlog or Vlog L on the interchangeable lens cameras, you want something that you're going to be able to maybe color grade relatively close to, you know, something like those cameras. That's where something like our FZ2500 comes in. It's a lot bigger, so it's not small. But think of the FZ2500 as basically a GH4 just in a fixed lens camera. That's this is a camera that has basically, it's a 20 megapixel 1-inch sensor. It's getting you Vlog. You do have to get the SFU1 update for it, or the upgrade for it. But it has a lot of other cool features. Like it has built-in dolly zooms. Which I'm actually, we're actually preparing something for our Instagram account. We've been doing these technical challenges where it's, you know, we're going to pose a technical challenge to the community and say, hey, you know, let's see what you guys can do with this. The FZ2500 can do built-in dolly zooms using the VFR function, so it's a pretty cool little feature for this if you're looking for something that's BTS, but it's not really that size-oriented camera. Outside of that, you could look at something like a ZS200, which is also a 1-inch sensor, and it's a relatively fast lens. You're looking at the ZS200 is, I believe, it is a 3.3. Yeah, an NF 3.3 lens. So not the longest or not the brightest lens out there, but still pretty solid for a 1-inch censored camera. But it also gets you a ton of reach there. So you have some pretty cool options. Let's see here. Some of the other questions. Albert, does Lumix have an action camera? Okay, yeah. So that was following up the other one. Video says, will there be a Mark III? I'm assuming you're talking about the LX100 Mark II. Unfortunately, I don't have information on if there's going to be updates or anything like that on the point and shoot cameras. If I did, I would, we would talk about them, but unfortunately, I just don't have any info on new point and shoot cameras. So the LX100 Mark II is the current, kind of front runner of the LX style cameras. And one of the interesting questions that I did just see come up was, what is the actual difference between an LX100 and an LX100 Mark II? And really the biggest differences come down to the actual sensor. So you're looking at the original LX100 used a 12.8 or it's a 16 megapixel multi-aspect sensor that was getting you 12.8 megapixels as your image. The Mark II is using a, I think it's a 20 megapixel, 20 megapixel sensor, which is outputting at a 17 megapixel image. And for those that don't know, a multi-aspect sensor, what that means is that the camera, you'll see two resolution numbers show up on an LX camera. You'll see a relatively high number, so 16 or 20, and then you'll see a smaller number. In the LX100 Mark II's case, it's a 17 megapixel. What that means is that on this particular camera, and let me see if I can get this set up so that you guys can actually see it. So it makes a little more sense what I'm actually trying to talk about here. So if we look here on the top of the LX100 Mark II, you'll see that there's a selector dial up here, which says 3:2, 4:3, 1:1, and 16:9. What that is the aspect ratio switch on this particular camera. And the difference in how this camera works versus something like just using a standard camera and then just changing the aspect ratios later is that in every one of the aspect ratios except 1:1, the camera is going to be shooting 17 megapixel. So you're not getting a penalty in resolution because you're changing the aspect ratio. The trade-off there means that when you shoot RAW, still images with an LX100 Mark II. It means that the raw image is the actual aspect ratio that you've shot it at, versus cameras like the GH series or the G9, or I think even the G7 was the first one that did this. If you go into the camera menu and you change and say, I want to shoot 16:9, shoot it in RAW, load it into Lightroom, the Micro Four Thirds cameras, you'll actually see the full 4:3 aspect ratio, and it's just telling the software where the crop should be. Multi-aspect sensors don't do that. It actually is recording the resolution that you've got the aspect ratio set to. So the GH5S is the same as the LX100 Mark II in that case. So yeah, you're getting much higher resolution than you do on a original LX100 if you go with an LX100 Mark II. Some of the other, kind of differences are really under the hood differences. So it uses the newer, an upgraded version of the Venus engine, which is the processor that we use for our cameras that we make. It added things like the Bluetooth control, so you're able to use Bluetooth control on the mobile device apps. It also gave a little bit better way to do things like geotagging versus some of the older cameras by using that Bluetooth functionality. It basically just refined everything about the camera into a more modern setup. So better looking, higher quality video. You have some of the newer functionality with the touchscreen interface on the back. The original LX100 was not a touchscreen, so now you're getting touchscreen on this one. So yeah, it gives you some nice improvements over the original. Let's see here. Other questions that came up. So hopefully that's a rough idea about an LX100 Mark II versus a Mark I. Successors to the ZS100, ZS200 must have selfie capable LCD. So we do have a style camera in that form factor. That would be the ZS70 and the ZS80. Similar form factor, similar reach as far as the lens goes. And they do have the front-facing screen on it. So you do have the ability to flip the screen up and have it facing towards you, which if I go here, you'll take a look at that one. It's a 1/2 sensor, and it's 20 megapixel versus the 1-inch sensor. So there is kind of an option there, kind of for that style camera with a selfie-facing style screen. And I think we do have an image here that shows it. Yeah. So you do have one that's available there. It's just not necessarily a ZS100 or 200 update. Let's see the other question here. What improvements would you want for the LX100 cameras? If you're asking me, I actually kind of just love the simplicity of the camera. I'm not one of the ones that's necessarily like I want every little crazy feature built into every single little camera. I look at cameras as a very relatively purpose-built product. Like an LX100 Mark II, as it sits, is basically one of my perfect cameras to go with. Other cameras, things like, I have a full spectrum converted S1R that I shoot infrared and IR chrome and stuff like that with. Again, it's a purpose-driven camera, so a lot of the stuff like that's not something that a brand is actually going to make a camera for. So I buy the cameras, I use the cameras, and it's perfect for what it is, at least in my opinion. But that's a good point. If there's something that anyone in the chat is saying, hey, this is what I would love to see in a camera like that, sound off in the chat, because our engineers read these chats so that they can see, what is everyone asking for. Jim's asking, can you touch on long exposures? You have an LX100 Mark II. Yes, I can. So this is one of the other kind of nice advantages of actually an LX100 Mark II that I think a lot of people might not realize actually is part of this camera. So the LX100 Mark II has a couple of different options when it comes to long exposure shooting. You have an actual timer mode, which lets you press the shutter by actually going to the T on the shutter dial, or the shutter speed dial on the top. Push the T, put it in T, push the shutter button. it just opens the shutter, and then you press the button again, and you can go into a basically it's a timer mode. So it's what we used to do with like a bulb, where you'd lock the bulb and then wait until you're done, and then click it again, and then your shutter's gone. So you have some of that. Probably the biggest thing when it comes to long exposure with a camera like this is really you wanna shoot the camera as manual as possible for long exposures with any point and shoot. I don't care who makes it, what camera it is, whatever it is. You want to shoot at the lowest possible ISO that you can go, and you're probably going to be leaning more on the longest time length that the shutter can actually run for. When it comes to point and shoot cameras, you are going to notice typically that the longest shutter duration, so how long the shutter can stay open, is typically going to be lower than what you see in an SLR. And a lot of that usually just comes down to either the mechanisms that are being used in them or the heat generation. Because whenever you're running a sensor, if you're doing long exposure shooting, if you're doing video, it generates heat. So cameras in a point and shoot category, they're usually not going to be able to do the longest shutter lengths because heat will start to build up, and heat is the enemy of a clean image with a digital sensor. The hotter a sensor gets, the more noise you see, the more hotter stuck pixels you get. So yeah, I think you can do a 60-second exposure, so you can only do a 1 minute long exposure on an LX100 Mark II. So that's one of the things you can do. But if you want to do really, really long exposure, so say you want to do a 20-minute long exposure, one of the things that you can do is be able to set up an LX100 Mark II and basically just trigger the shutter after every one of those minutes. You can do this by turning long exposure noise reduction off so you don't get the extra 60 seconds afterwards where it's doing dark frame. And then take it into something like Photoshop or whatever your editing software is, and then you can blend those images together if you want to do star trails. This can be really useful to get yourself into that style shooting without necessarily having to go out and buy a much larger style camera, so interchangeable lens, that kind of level, and still get some really good results. Because this is still a really large sensor. The sensor that's in the LX100 Mark II is a 4/3 inch sensor, so it is a micro 4/3 sensor, and it is 20 megapixel. It's just multi-aspect. So hopefully that's a couple little things for long exposure work. The other thing is to make sure you're either shooting in RAW. If you're going to be working with the files afterwards, just gives you much more flexibility, especially to do noise reduction later. And you can also do stuff like my brain just as far as white balance goes, when you're shooting something like that, typically really low light, like true nighttime photography, you're probably going to be closer to the tungsten white balance. So if you set your camera, you shoot in RAW, set it to tungsten white balance, you're going to get really close to what the white balance should be. But you'll probably still want to tweak it a little bit later, which is where things like this come in handy. This is just an X-Rite color checker that I always basically have thrown in the bag. Or something like I use an Expo disc that you just put over the lens, do your white balance, and then you're good. Let's see here. Any news on the 2.8 or the 24 millimeter f1.8L? It was announced a while ago. Fortunately, Cliff, no new information on the last two f1.8 lenses yet. As soon as we have information, you know that you'll see emails and all the posts in every location about it. Yeah. Let's see here. Dave says, is there a point and shoot in the line favored for underwater photo and video? One for third-party housings exists. So there are underwater housings. I do know that. And there are underwater housings for things like the LX100, which will get you a better actual image because you're looking at, a micro 4/3 sensor, or a 4/3 sensor. Micro 4/3 is the mount. It's a 4/3 sensor, so you're going to be able to capture more light and get a better, kind of just higher ISO shooting out of a camera like this. But we do have the TS7, which is an actual waterproof camera. And I'm actually very specific about that. These are actually, underwater waterproof cameras. that are designed to go down to 102 feet. So if you're snorkeling, these kinds of cameras can actually be really good. The trade-off here is that a lot of these cameras, they're much smaller sensors. So you're looking at, the 1/2.3 inch sensors. So, they're good. They're going to be great for, relatively shallow shooting. But if you need to start adding lights, that kind of thing, if you're actually doing, scuba diving, they're going to work, but you are going to want to have some sort of light with you, since if you've shot underwater, you know how quick you lose light as you go deeper and deeper. So that's kind of the underwater choice that you'd probably want to go with if you're just snorkeling, is a TS7. Outside of that, you could look at something like an LX100 Mark II with an underwater housing. I think it's... Actually, I'm not going to say which underwater housings because I can't remember who actually has the underwater housings for the LX100s. Let's see here. Keith says, FZ2500 has the same specs as the AG-CX350 Professional Series camcorder. Yep, it has very, very similar specs to the CX350. Think of the FZ2500 as basically a camcorder just built into a bridge-style camera. So bridge just means DSLR style with a fixed lens. It has very, very similar features built into it. Even down to the fact that the way the actual lens mechanism is designed to minimize, if you're doing any kind of zooming shot, so like that, I said it before, and I always call it vertigo effect, because the style, or the Hitchcock effect. Dolly zoom, that's the word. When you're doing the dolly zoom, because it's zooming, it has extra reinforcement to make sure that the lens barrel stays perfectly straight as you're zooming, so you don't get any kind of sway as the elements are moving. So it's really, really awesome for that kind of shooting. Let's see here. Jean-Luc says, you need another option in your poll. I get my information from DP Review and BNH. Yeah, unfortunately, YouTube only lets you put 4 choices in the poll. So I figured the 4 most that at least we're involved in, we know everyone goes and gets information from the different review sites. I'm just curious where all of you are seeing information on Lumix cameras, at least from these 4. So if you haven't taken the poll, I would love to see, we've already got a number of people who've taken it, and it looks like YouTube is definitely leading out on this list here. But I know... yeah, there's a bunch of other places. I just had to kind of pick the 4 that came to mind. Let's see here. Rearman says, IR is still IR converted is still have IBIS and dust cleaning function and autofocus. Yeah, my S1R does still have autofocus. The IBIS still works perfectly fine. And I forget what our dust. I think dust cleaning works fine on it. I haven't had to do anything to it yet, so it works good. I had it converted by a company, Kalari Vision, up in New Jersey. Had mine converted there. So, let's see here. Why Panasonic not just release a full spectrum variant for people not to need void warranty? I would love to buy a camera without hot mirror directly without conversion. Camera companies probably would never sell a direct full spectrum mass market camera because the fact is they're still very specialized. Most shooting is probably not going to really be super conducive to a factory converted camera. But something like that is something that I have actually brought up. I would love to see either a full spectrum. I know that there have been Astro variants of cameras before, which are very specific, but they usually end up costing a lot more than a standard camera because of the conversions. But there's options. You can always pick up a used Lumix camera and go get them converted. I got the S1R converted because that was my camera, and I love shooting Astro, and I like shooting the infrared stuff. So yeah, you can throw things like I have their IR chrome filter, which I use on mine, which mimics aerochrome. Let's see here. Harold says, for an upgrade to the LX100, an OLED EVF, built-in view flash, ND filters, PASM dial. I can see a lot of those. If it had a PASM dial, it wouldn't be an LX100, though. It'd be a TS or ZS camera. It's one of the things about it is you know, when you look at what these different cameras go, it's a lot about the different styling. You know, what kind of shooting do you like? If you're someone who's doing a lot of street photography, traditionally, and this is a fairly blanket statement, and I'm not doesn't necessarily mean it's the right statement for everybody, but having direct access to the aperture dial and the shutter speed dial and exposure compensation can be a big advantage, especially because of how quick it is to just make the adjustments on the fly to shoot with. But that's also why we make things like the ZS cameras. We make if you're overseas, it's the TZ cameras. It's why we make the FZ cameras. There's usually a camera that fits most of the needs for most people out there. Let's see here. Video says, when I use the LX100, they tend to have a strong pink tint. Not everybody resorts to post, but delivery. Okay. One of the things that you can do if you're noticing that, say the certain color styling or color profile that's being used by the camera, since every manufacturer makes their own look and their own style. If you're noticing that, like, you know, it might be maybe a little too magenta for you, or the skin tones might be a little, you know, not exactly what you'd like. If you go into the white balance settings, one thing is I highly recommend, if you're looking at color accuracy and you want repeatable color accuracy, don't use auto white balance. Go into one of the custom white balance settings. You'll be able to press up to actually select a white point, which lets you put the box there, push the button, takes a picture, and sets your white balance based on that surface. But you also have the ability to press down on that adjustment and then actually adjust your tint. So you can go more green or magenta. You can go more, forget what A and B is. But yeah, there's all different control on here for the different toning of the image to get it back to, you know, where your particular style is color-wise. It makes it much more like we used to, you know, when you'd shoot chrome film and you want to get it right out of camera and you don't want to work in post with it. So it does have that flexibility in there for you. Let's see here. RJ, is it true that the LX100 has less of a crop when you shoot than the LX100? Less than the LX100 Mark II? In certain modes, the LX100 has slightly less crop in certain modes because the resolution's lower. The LX100 Mark II has, in certain modes, can have a little bit more of a crop, but the image quality is going to be much higher than you see on the LX100. A lot of that comes down to just the sensor resolution and what type of 4K it's doing. Most cameras from the LX100 Mark II, when this camera came out, typically were shooting pixel-to-pixel 4K. So you're doing 3840 by 2160 of the sensor. So if you have a higher resolution sensor, it's a larger punch in that you have to do 3840 by 2160 versus a 16 megapixel sensor, or 12, which is the output resolution, to get down to that 8 megapixel. So there are little differences there when it comes to that. Someone says, how do you set up Ninja 5 with a BGH1? I'm not having any luck. I know it's not a point. I know this is point and shoot time. Sorry about that. No problem. We will actually be talking about that next week. Next week is the entire G series stream. But if you take a look at the Lumix Academy playlists online, so if you go to YouTube and you just search Lumix Academy, I can put it up as a card after this, like after the video has been posted. We do have videos and stuff on the BGH1 so that you can get yourself set up with those. Let's see here. I want to purchase a new vlogging camera in Lumix, please. Which camera should I buy? It's a loaded question. It's going to depend on what you want to shoot with. There are tons of different cameras that are all going to be great at different types of shooting. As far as vlogging, if it's something where you're going to be hand-holding it and you want it on your face and basically you're going to be shooting kind of like this, you could look at something like an LX camera, LX100, LX10. The LX10 has a flip-up screen. It's close to an LX100. It's a little bit smaller sensor, but it has a fast lens, and it has that flip-up screen, so that's something you could take a look at. The other option is you could look at something like, let's a G85, G95. If you really want to go up, you could look at a G9, which has one of our more advanced focusing systems in it with the most recent update. So there's a couple of different options. It just really depends on what your budget is and what you're looking at. You could even go with a G100, but the G100 doesn't have mechanical stabilization. It uses electronic. So it does pretty good as a vlog camera, but it's really, really comfortable as a kind of general all-around camera. It's good for certain types of vlogging. It's great for general compact, high-resolution stills camera. So some of them are going to be better than others for that. Harold says, the only reason I mentioned PASM dial is on the top of the LX7, my first LX. Yeah, so the LX7, its predecessor, yeah, that one did have the PASM dial. And then, like, as the cameras kind of evolved and stuff, that was one of the things that I know when we developed the original LX100, we got a lot of people asking about that question of, you know, they want direct control over shutter. It was the retro camera era when everyone started wanting ultra retro manual controlled cameras. Yeah. Outside of that, if you're looking, you know, something like that, I would honestly look at like a ZS200 as a relatively solid alternative to something like an LX100 that has PASM, has some, you know, a little bit more, you know, general things that work comfortable with it, so that it's maybe a little bit easier on muscle memory if you're coming from an interchangeable lens camera. So let's see here. I want to get to a couple of the questions that we had in the emails that got sent over. So one of the questions was, how do you keep from accidentally hitting the wheel when shooting in program and switching white balance or ISO unknowingly? And that question's relating to an LX100 Mark II. One of the things that, with any camera, usually you start to look at, sorry, I poked myself in the eye before. One of the things that you start to kind of look at is, you know, how you can set a camera up so that you're not adjusting things or changing things. You know, usually it's by accident because you bump something. Short of, it's gonna sound like a cop-out a little bit of an answer, but a lot of times it's just a matter of adjusting your hold a little bit on the camera. One of the things that a lot of people tend to do with a point and shoot is you tend to kind of hold it, you know, ultra grip it like this. A lot of times, you know, you have the grippy part on the back here, you have a little bit of the bump here in the front, and if you were to hold the camera kind of a little bit more off to the side to shoot with, you get a little bit more of a claw grip on it. But use both hands when you're shooting with it, and you'll find that a lot of times you're not actually going anywhere near the buttons on the back of the camera. And I say that that's kind of a cop-out response because that's kind of dictating people how they should hold a camera. There really isn't a right way to hold a camera or a wrong way to, well, take that back. There is a wrong way to hold a camera. Don't ever hold a camera and hold it on top of the lens like this because you're pushing down on the front of the lens. And you're actually gonna cause more shake. You want to cradle a camera, so you want to shoot like this. But with point and shoots, it's usually just a matter of moving your grip, the rest of your thumb, moving it off just a little bit to the side, and then you're not going to hit any of the buttons on the back. So that question came in through the chat, or through email, sorry. And then let's see here. One of the other questions that came in was from someone who's using a ZS100. When I compare photos to a cell phone, to my Panasonic, the Panasonic photos don't have the same vivid colors. Example, like in a sunset. What am I doing wrong? I know the Panasonic lets in lots of light. Maybe the photo is getting washed out accordingly, and you're using auto mode. So this is one of the things that comes up when you start looking at, you know, what a camera is designed to give you versus what a phone is designed to give you. Cell phones are designed to give you incredibly, you know, vivid. They claim that they're trying to give you very accurate colors, but they're not. Based on a style that is most commonly sought after. So if you're looking, and I'm going to use the sunset shot as a good example of this. you'll look at an image like that and you'll see that a traditional camera is going to give it maybe a little bit flatter of a looking image. It's not going to be as punchy or vibrant as a cell phone image will. And the reason behind that is because you're capturing a lot more information than what a cell phone does. The way you get around this, if you're using full automatic, is honestly, on a ZS100, take it out of automatic. Don't use the actual just fully automatic mode, so the IA mode. If you take any of our point and shoot cameras and put it into the P mode, so program, it's still going to function as an automatic camera, but it's going to give you more options to actually work with. So you'll be able to use something like the vivid color profile, which will actually boost those colors. It'll get you something that's a little bit closer to what you see from a mobile device that's going to boost the saturation of all these images anyway. You also do have the ability to go in when you're in that program mode and you're selecting vivid. You can even go in there and boost the vivid colors and the vivid, the saturation of the image. You can keep, boosting that and making it your own look. Ultimately, what you'll find is that when you capture an image like that on a camera as opposed to a cell phone, you have that much more flexibility to play with it. A lot of our cameras all shoot RAW internally. And a lot of mobile devices, whether it's iPhone or Android, I don't think Windows phones, because I don't know who has Windows phones anymore. If you have a Windows phone, I'm sorry. But most mobile devices have the ability to, at least some sort of free program, let you edit RAW files, which it is going to take a little bit more work than a mobile device as far as like a snapshot goes. But even if you take that standard looking image that comes right out of the camera and then you put it into something like Snapseed and start pushing the saturation, pushing the brightness, increasing the contrast, you'll make an image that looks infinitely better than what a mobile device was ever able to capture. So hopefully that answers that question from the email. I don't know if the person is joining us live or if they were emailing since they couldn't join us live. So let's see here. Another question that I'm using an FZ300 and I really like mine. I really like it, but mine is well used now. Will there be an update? Would be great to get the new JPEG engine on an FZ400. Yeah, so unfortunately, I don't have any updates on whether or not there's an update for an FZ300. I wish I did. I just don't have anything to share with you. Let's see here. Ulrich says, Panasonic is doing a lot at the Olympics. Is there info or videos about what's happening in the 8K arena? Also so bullet time replays. Is that done with BGH1? I have no information about what's going on with the Olympics. We are an Olympic sponsor, Panasonic as the brand, so the global Panasonic. You'll see a ton of our displays there and some broadcast stuff there, I believe, as well. But if you take a look at the Panasonic social media channels, so not Lumix, but the actual like Panasonic USA, Panasonic, they do have some information about what's going on at the Olympics over there. I just don't have any information as to what Lumix involvement is there. So yeah, sorry. Let's see, one of the questions that came in here. How do Panasonic point and shoot cameras differ from their Leica branded brothers? That is a good question. There are some core differences between them. Namely, if you take a look at a Leica camera, there's a lot of work that Leica does on their camera. Color toning, menu design, actual exterior chassis, all that kind of stuff. They are different cameras. They're just very similar. It just comes down to really which style you like better. But yeah, there are the Leica versions of the cameras that we have too. So not all of them, but some of them. Let's hear. I'm late to the party. FZH1, very compact 1-inch sensor camcorder with stills capability, or a bridge with crazy video specs. As presumably wondering if Lumix has planned for its development. Oh, okay. Now I'm following. FZH1. You're asking for a 1-inch censored camcorder with stills capability or a bridge. I have no info if there's anything like that planned. The closest to what you're describing would be an FZ2500, which is a 1-inch censored camcorder that's designed basically like a GH series camera, just in a 1-inch sensor. So FZ2500, it's a little older right now, but it gives you Vlog L. It gives you, you know, a nice large viewfinder. It's got a 24 to 480 millimeter lens on it. It is designed, as was mentioned before, very close to a CX350. So you're looking at something pretty similar to a camcorder style, just with pro video functionality in it as well. And it shoots things like MOV, MP4, so you've got the high-end capabilities there. Let's see here. Suggestion: when I go on vacation, I want to shoot video of the scene as I walk around town. Small point and shoot would be nice. Please buy a camera with good stabilization. Okay, so like on-person cameras. Yeah, there's always options like that. Truthfully, you know, probably the most common thing that we're going to have as far as point and shoot goes for travel and things like that, is going to be something like the LX100. I think is probably still going to be one of my number one suggestions for that kind of travel-friendly, you know, do everything, you know, and do everything pretty well. That's probably the best one to go with as far as travel goes. If you know that you want zoom range, that's definitely where you look at something like a ZS200. If you're street photography, that kind of thing, LX100 Mark II all the way. Or even an LX10. Those are still around too. Rob, what's your tattoo? I have a couple of tattoos. They're lenses. They're actually all LUMIX Leica lenses, as well as aperture and film and the state of Texas. Okay. So, was out cycling with my LX3. Still a great camera. Yes, it is. It's one of the fun things about the Lumix cameras in general is that I come across people all the time that tell me, you know, they've got an LX camera, they've got an LX3, and they've had it since it launched, and it's still working perfect. You know, they picked up, you know, a GX7 when it first came out, and the thing is still working for them, or a GF1, you know, one of the original, you know, kind of flat type cameras that we made. Our cameras tend to really stand the test of time as far as durability and reliability. So, yeah, definitely a lot of fun. Let's see if there are any other questions, because we have been going for a little over an hour right now, and I actually can't run an hour and a half like we ran last week, because I do have other things I have to do today as well. So let's just take a look real quick at some of the email questions to see if there was anything else here. Looks. Oh, okay. So person was actually watching on the stream. So awesome for sending the email in. I was able to answer it and not have to look through the chat. So cool. All right, everybody. So with that, we're actually going to wrap up today. As I said, this month we're taking a little bit of a kind of change to the content that we're creating for the month of August. We're doing a lot more kind of technical back and forth conversations, addressing questions that everyone in the chat has. Each week we're going to be doing some of these little polls at the beginning of the chat, because again, if you were joining us last week, I just realized I haven't been doing these for an entire year, and we have the ability to just throw simple little polls out here. So it's kind of cool to just get a read of all of you to see where you all actually are collecting and learning information about the cameras. It's cool to see that YouTube is 74% of everyone here, so that's kind of awesome to see. As a reminder, next week is our G-Series focused Lumix Live, so we'll be talking all things G-Series cameras. So I know some people had some questions about BGH1. I see a couple questions about cameras like the GX series cameras. So we're going to be talking all about that kind of stuff next week. We're actually going to be focusing on the G95 next week, because for the entire time that camera's been out, I've only actually had hands-on with it for a couple of weeks in the entire time it's been out. And I have one down here, and I've been having so much fun shooting with it. So I want to use that camera as kind of the feature so that everyone can, you know, kind of see some of the cool stuff that the camera has. And hopefully I can address some questions for the G shooters out there. As a last reminder, remember about the Lumix Pro Services program. We have two different versions here. We have the red tier in the United States, and we have the platinum tier in the United States as well. These are the programs that are designed for photographers and videographers that need to be able to have a support structure behind their purchase of a camera and want to be able to have the actual kind of backbone known that you're going to be ready to go and protected should you end up needing to go into service. The red tier is a free level membership that gets you 3-year manufacturer warranty extension. You get a online servicing of any kind of warranties, that kind of thing. And it just gets you an overall, kind of peace of mind ready to go with it. Then we have the Platinum Series, which is the paid service, which gets you an exclusive membership kit when you join in, which is a Peak Design strap. So it's a customized Peak Design strap with the Lumix Pro Services logo there. You also get a 2-day turnaround time with free next-day shipping on repairs. So you know that you're going to have your equipment back pretty quick. You also have 20% off out of warranty repairs. So if you drop the camera, drop a lens or something like that, you get a little bit of a discount on an out of warranty repair. You also get, probably most importantly, a direct access line for support. So this lets you actually call in and check in if you've got problems or issues that you can troubleshoot instead of having to go on through a chat program or through email. And last but not least, you get sensor cleanings and all that kind of fun stuff. So that's the US side of the Lumix Pro services. If you are joining from overseas or one of the other countries where Lumix cameras are sold, we also have the Lumix Pro services globally available in a number of countries. So the link that I just dropped in the chat has all the countries that are set up and ready to go currently, with the coming soon right now, which is Australia. So there's probably going to be an option relatively close to where most people are going to be. If your country's not listed on there, let your local Panasonic team know that it's something that you would like to see as we build this program out. It's still a relatively new program, so we're constantly improving and building these things out as time goes on. With that, thank you everybody for tuning in on this point and shoot specific stream. As a reminder, again, we'll be live next Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time to talk about the G-Series and everything to do with our G-Series cameras. As a heads up, I do not have and I do not plan to have any information on GH6 for next week. That information will come out when it's ready to come out. So just giving some of you a heads up for those that are going to join that stream. If you're asking about it, I just won't be able to talk about anything because I don't have anything to talk about. Otherwise, thanks again, everybody, for joining. If you enjoyed the content, if you enjoyed the conversation we had, I really appreciate a like and a subscribe to the Lumix USA channel. It helps me out tremendously in bringing more of this content to everybody. And these are fun. I really enjoy doing them, and I want to constantly be able to evolve this and bring everybody new content. So with that, thanks again, everybody. Hope you all have a good rest of your day, and I will see you next Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Take care.